It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Thursday, January 19th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is actually intrigued by seeing the Blackhawks for the first time this season tonight. They've got a lot going on.
They do.
We're going to get into that. Plus, we've got a prospect profile on Will Smith coming up on today's show.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Flyers. That is where you'll keep up to date on the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email the show at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. We are free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you get your podcasts. So subscribe. You'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Plus, we're over on YouTube, so subscribe there as well. Russ, we do have to talk about the fallout from the Ivan Provorov decision not to skate warmups on Flyers Pride Night. And, it really made some waves to the point where the NHL came out with a statement. Basically, I mean, it was a corporate speak statement. Let's be real.
Right. I mean, it's not their fight, just to use a word.
Yeah.
It's not, so they weren't gonna do anything. It was on Fox News last night, as we figured. It's it's a Flyers thing and a Provorov thing, and like I said, I feel like Provorov, basically blindsided them with this.
He
I know.
did.
I was gonna say, I know everybody says they should know in advance because of the jersey and everything, but we don't know what transpired when all that happened. Maybe he even was thinking about playing, going to warmups. We don't know. So it did seem like that he did blindside him.
Yeah, I mean, there's multiple outlets reporting that it was a very last minute notification to the team
Right.
about it. And so, it did cause them problems.
Yeah.
He absolutely has the right to believe what he wants to believe. Like, that's not the issue here. It's like how all of this was handled. And, blindsiding the team like that was inappropriate. And again, I will say it's disrespectful to Scott Lawton and JVR for all the incredible
Definitely.
work that they did and trying to create a welcoming atmosphere for the specific fans that they had been working with. They had a reception with about 50 LGBTQ people that they attended. It took Lawton away from that reception because he had to comment on the situation.
Yep.
And, it just, and having him there now with him having made this active decision to not participate, if you're LGBTQ and you're in the stands and you see him skate out there, you think, yeah, that Philadelphia Flyers player doesn't think that I should be here. And it's a very difficult thing to experience when you want to be a fan of this team. And, there's a player that actively doesn't think that you're worthy. And
Right. I mean, that's
it's
something.
tough. It's tough.
It is tough. I pointed out yesterday on another show. I'm like, what it really to me boils down to is either you're against unity or you're against the lifestyle, and clearly he's against the lifestyle. Like that's
Well, and
that's
it's not even a lifestyle.
no, it's true, but I mean,
It's
just
an existence,
right. Yeah, and so clearly he's not with that. And the thing is, you don't. it's not an endorsement of anything by putting on a hockey jersey. That's the thing. I used an example like if we at Locked On here had a company-wide thing where we were going to do silly Christmas sweaters. I think you and I would do it, even though we're Jewish, because we'd be like, fine, we don't believe in Christmas, but it doesn't matter. This is not like
Yeah,
an
or we'd come
endorsement
up with
of it.
like a silly Hanukkah sweater or
Right,
something, to participate but not like
right,
disrespect.
right. I
Yeah.
mean,
It
that's
yeah.
the part is it wasn't, it's not an endorsement. Um, And honestly, I called him small-minded on another show, and I do think he's small-minded. And I would hope that he would talk to somebody from like You Can Play or some group out there just to have a dialogue. I think he could learn a lot from that. But will he do that? Probably not.
Yeah, and it makes it difficult from a hockey perspective too, in
Yes.
terms of if they want to trade him. Now it says he's not a team player, and it makes the idea of trading him more difficult,
Yeah,
and it
he
means you're
shrunk
going to
his
get less
value.
in return. Yeah.
Yeah, he shrunk his value because there were going to be certain teams with cities with, a large gay population that they're not going to want to touch this now. And it's understandable. And I would think it would be about 5 to 7 teams for sure that would say, not now.
Yep. 100% agree that it's all of this, and it has just made it worse for the team. It's worse for him. And it's worse for the initiatives that the Flyers are trying to put forth to create a welcoming
Well,
atmosphere for all fans.
yes, that's the thing here. It definitely took away from the evening, which I thought they this was the best job the Flyers had done. I wasn't at that game, but I've been to all the others, and I felt like this was their best effort. And
Yes.
after a while, that was thwarted. And again, I think the other thing that has to be pointed out, whether because it's just a fact, there will be some fans now that are like, I'm not buying a Provorov jersey. I'm not buying uh, even anything now from the Flyers because they're going to be angry at Provorov, and it's not the Flyers' fault, but the Flyers will take the brunt of it for some of these other initiatives in the future. And what if you lost a couple season ticket holders out of it? It's very possible. I mean, those are things that can financially impact your team just with a decision like that.
Yeah, and, I don't know, I understand the issue in terms of, if this is something that he feels very strongly about. I just think that when you're in a team environment and this affects the business that you are employed by, you have to have, like, a more cohesive plan around this, and the fact that he denied the Flyers the opportunity to have a plan and, and to try and approach this in a more conducive way to keeping the spirit of the evening alive, like, that's a problem.
Yeah,
And I just it's not like, it did not happen in an appropriate manner.
no, I mean, he's definitely lost fans over this, and these are fans that pay his salary. Like that's the other part of this. That's like, yes, he is entitled to make whatever decisions he wants, but now these decisions could impact him, and that's what happens sometimes.
Yep. All right. Well, we do have another game tonight to look forward to, and it's against a team that is, similar to the Ducks that we just played, has been struggling a lot this season, despite having a couple superstars there and making some big moves over the offseason last year, and that's the Chicago Blackhawks. And we will be talking about tonight's game coming up next. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball, soccer, esports, and of course the NHL. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts like ours, you can find those at Bet Online as well. We're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. Russ, we are indeed facing the Chicago Blackhawks tonight, and it felt like we had played Chicago to me for some reason, but we had
Yeah.
not yet. So, I think the Blackhawks are in a bit of a turmoil themselves. They had a very crazy game recently, losing 8-5 to the Seattle Kraken. I think they were down 6-0 at some point, and the Kraken had scored. It was like 6 goals on 7 shots or something along those lines. But that game just kind of like defense went out the window entirely. But they did come back and win in overtime versus the Buffalo Sabres, who are in their own weird spiral right now on Tuesday. But I think, the big story for the Blackhawks this season is kind of blowing up the last of the core of that team. And are they going to trade Patrick Kane or Jonathan Toews at deadline?
Yeah, I Jonathan Toews will get traded. Patrick Kane, it'll depend on his health. Like, he's got this knee or hip issue, and I don't know. I mean, has he gotten in? Let's see. No, he hasn't gotten back in games yet. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be hard to ask teams to give up a boatload of assets for, a little bit of an older player who's really great. Don't get me wrong. He can still play, but if he's banged up, I don't know if anybody's going to want him, or if you have to get him and sit him for until the playoffs. It's like it's hard to build continuity within the team that way. So it's up in the air about Kane right now, I think.
Yeah, it's really odd because I think with both of those guys, with Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane, I think the expectation was that they were going to end their careers in Chicago and just be one of those lifers in the NHL, playing for the same team their whole careers. And I think the Blackhawks just overall, I think leading up to this year, did not do a good job in sort of managing the downward side of their peak, and so they found themselves in this situation where they have to do a rebuild with these very highly paid superstars that aren't what they used to be. Obviously, with Jonathan Toews, he was out an entire season,
Right.
um, with health issues. So, you didn't really see that coming, to
No,
be
that one
fair.
you
But
couldn't. Yeah, that you couldn't see coming. But the extensions are, hey, they were rewarded for all their cups, but in the end, they're stuck in this in between stage, and that's what I'm saying. I think you'll get something for Taves, but I think again he's at like a $10.5 million salary, so even prorated, they're going to have to eat half for a
yeah.
team to want to get him, and so yeah, it gets complicated. But as far as the team itself, they're lousy defensively, like they're just
Oh,
straight
yeah.
up lousy. I mean, maybe the worst defensive team in the league. Just when you watch them, you could just see it. So they are going to have to outscore. And this is a game where if the Flyers just play disciplined hockey, they should win. Now, that's not to say Chicago doesn't have any good players. I like Philip Kurashev. Uh, I've liked him since his
Yeah,
draft.
he's the big bright spot on that team right
Yes.
now. He's having a really good season.
He's an interesting guy because he kind of came in under the radar a little bit at the draft. I believe Igor Larionov is his agent, so he lived with him for a while. So he got mentored by him, and so yeah, he's a guy that's got good vision, good speed, always a threat to score out there. He's not like a superstar or anything in the making, but a really nice player.
Yeah, and you mentioned their terrible defense. They cough up the puck a lot, and I think that's something the Flyers are going to have to take advantage of. And when the Blackhawks do give up the puck and the Flyers can get a takeaway, they're going to have to get a positive scoring chance out of it. Like that's the thing, because the Blackhawks can score goals,
Hmm.
but um it really is defensively that they're the weakest on. One thing that's interesting about them is that despite being the third worst team in the NHL right now, they are the best at faceoffs. And,
That's wild.
it is wild. They're like above 54%, I believe, which is like really good. So,
Yeah, you would think
um,
you'd be able to parlay that into, some more goals, but
but no. Yeah, they have a negative 59 goal differential, which is,
insane.
again, the third worst in the league. They have the least goals for at 98.
Let me just point out how insane it is that it's only the third worst. 59 is only the third worst. Like, that should be the worst, but this year is so oddly, just the top and the bottom are so far apart that it's only the third. Like, that is crazy to me.
Yeah, I know. Their special teams are kind of Flyers-esque in that, they're 12th overall in the power play because they do have a couple of
Oh,
guys
yeah.
that can score in those situations. But they have a worse penalty kill than the Flyers. And so if the Flyers were looking for a game to do something positive on the power play front, this would be a good game to do it in. And I know because of the heavy schedule, the Flyers aren't really able to practice. And when you need to improve something like the power play, practice is very key. But at the same time, you got to take the chances where they fall.
Yeah, I mean, Seth Jones is always, a guy you have to worry about. Uh, he's still a really good player, he's just in a sea of not really good players. But again, you don't want the Flyers to take this game lightly. You don't.
Yeah, Seth Jones is a really interesting case because he's been kind of invisible for a huge part of this season. His ice time went down a little bit, and in that most recent game against the Sabres, he was part of the problem for the Sabres' first two goals in that game. So defensively, he wasn't playing well, but then he scored the game tying and winning goal. So, you see like where he can help that team, but at the same time, he is a defensive liability. And that was, part of the issue that we even talked about on this show when Seth Jones was available. In terms of why we would not want him on the Flyers is because, it was interesting because he's a defensive liability, right? And so we didn't really want him. And then they signed Tony D'Angelo, who is a defensive liability for the
Yeah,
most part. So,
well put.
um,
But you didn't sign
sometimes
him,
it just
Rachel. I think that's key to point
that's
out.
true. That is true. Although, and to be fair to Tony D'Angelo, his defense is getting a little better. I think the structure is helping him a little bit. He's not there yet, but
No, but,
uh,
the one thing, and, Martin Baron said this on Sirius the other day, he can't always die for the puck like that. It's bad for the goalies. It takes away their vision.
yeah, that's true. That is very true. So he can get a stick in there every now and
Yes,
again and
that's
make
what he
some good
needs to do
plays.
more than the diving thing.
Yeah, yeah. But, at any rate, I think that this is, in this stretch of a very busy schedule, this week is actually, a lighter week in terms of their opponents. We saw the Ducks, tonight is the Blackhawks, over the weekend is the Red Wings, who have been a bit of a mixed bag. Next week is a hell of a lot more difficult with another, 4 games that are against much tougher teams, and so
The
the
Red
Flyers
Wings
should take
could still
advantage of this week.
Yeah, the Red Wings could still be problematic, and, in this game, Max Domi could be problematic. He could have very good games. Tyler Johnson's still, not what he used to be, but a decent player. So I mean, you still have to watch him. It's still the NHL. I mean, it's one of those things where, hey, you know what? These are still NHL players. You give them a chance, you give them an opening, and they're going to take advantage of it. So I would like to see them win this game handily and not give up too much on, as far as penalties, because that's the clear thing is keep these guys out of the power play because they are good on the power play. And that should be a recipe for success. Do we think it's Carter Hart for this one? It should be, right?
I would guess so, just because we saw Samerson in the last game.
Yeah, although he's undefeated. Um, I mean, I just have to say that it's
No,
it's
well,
wild that he is.
I know, 5-0. Good on him,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
Very, very excited for him and for the possibility of him, being the goaltender. We'll see how the rest of the season plays out. Again, the Felix Sandstrom conditioning assignment expires today.
Well,
So,
Kiefer Bellows will go down. That'll be part of it because he hasn't
mhm,
played, but I don't know, you know, if that's going to be the full answer or not.
yeah. Yeah, we shall see. All right, we are going to switch gears and do a draft prospect profile next. And Russ got to see Will Smith play in person earlier this week, and we are going to talk about him next.
Looking for a delicious treat, but don't want all the fat and calories? Then you gotta try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, and I know my goal is to eat a little healthier this year. If you're like me, where you want to eat healthier but don't want to compromise taste, then man, I've got just the thing for you. You gotta try Built. With Built, healthy is actually tasty, perfect for your New Year's resolution. What makes Built Bar so good? Well, for starters, they're all covered in 100% real chocolate, and they come in unbelievably delicious flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. And that's what's even better than that is they're healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. And now you don't have to wait around to get a box. For years, we've been talking about ordering your built bars at built.com, but now you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk into the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of built bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. If you're close to Sam's Club, run in and get a 13-bar box with our hit flavors, brownie batter, and churro. You can thank me later.
Russ, you had the opportunity to go to the BioSteel Prospects game earlier this week. And, that's where they bring a bunch of draft eligible prospects together to play, in a more of an exhibition game. But it is a big deal for these kids. And Will Smith was player of the game in this one. So, what did you see from him in this game?
Yeah, so a couple things. First off, like I think this is the fifth time I've seen him live this year, so it's good to kind of catch up with a guy in this situation, and then in kind of like a different kind of game. What's interesting is this game was more physical than ever before. So, and even the coach told me after the game that yeah, they told the guys, play this like a regular hockey game, be physical. There was almost a fight. So the fact is that to me that changed what it is as far as competition, the level of it. Smith was great. The interesting thing about Smith is he's the kind of guy where, and I'm not comparing him to Artemi Panarin, but like Artemi Panarin, you could watch him and say, "Man, that is a bad period by him." And even think like I've even thought myself, "Wow, am I going to keep him in the same draft slot?" And then, sure enough, next period, and same thing in this game, he gets an amazing goal off a not an easy play off a turnover. I think the puck was bouncing a little, and he just wound up and hit it in the net. And that was probably a different kind of shot than I've seen him do, and it's impressive. He's very fast. He
Yeah, he's still a 17-year-old. He'll be turning 18 in March. He's about 6 feet tall, but he could get a little bigger, with a growth spurt. He does need to put on a little bit of size and build up strength, but he is on the national team development program team. Last season, he had 28 points in 36 games played. This year, 15 points in 9 games so far. He was playing on the U18 squad that took him away from that
right.
for a little bit. Um, he is just an incredible point producer.
He is very productive. I was standing right next to him, which I don't remember the last time I did. So I noticed that he can put some more muscle on his frame. He's got wide enough shoulders for that. He did seem a little taller than last time, so I think he's a legit 6 now. And he's actually what I find interesting about him was that he still called himself a kid, and that's good because like he was talking about playing video games and still being a kid, and that's a really good thing to be in that kind of place mentally when you're off the ice. So not everything is so heavy all the time, like you're under all this tremendous pressure. So I think that is for him to alleviate the pressure off the ice. He's a cool customer. He's a smart kid. His stick and puck control is very, very good. He I think his speed is more straight line speed, but it's good and you could see it. And yeah, he could score in a variety of different ways. I think he is still more of a playmaker than a scorer, but he does seem to be able to do both. He's an interesting guy. He is a true center. He he's good at faceoffs. He's good at drawing the puck back on faceoffs to set up scoring plays. So he's already got that in his arsenal. There's a lot of things to like here, and if the Flyers were somewhere in that 6-7 range, he'll be there. And again, this is the kind of draft where it's not really strong defensively. So even if the team says we have defensive needs, I don't think that would be the best pick in this spot. I think it would be Will Smith.
Right. And, we talked about that in our little introduction to the draft that, there could conceivably not be a defenseman picked until, the late teens um, in the kind of ranking order as things stand. And so you're looking at Will Smith, who is, I think your initial point about, sometimes he has really down periods
Hmm.
has led some people to choose to put him further down in the rankings. So some people who are like in the 8 to 10 range and some are in like 15 to 17. And I think that's probably the difference here. But I think that in that sort of range, you look at this kid's upside and I think the downside is fixable. That's the thing.
It is, and again, so maybe it's not fixable, but if he if he does seem to pull these same scoring feats like Panarin does, is it going to matter? Like Panarin disappears for 2 periods a game at times and then wins it for you in the third. Again, he's not going to score at that rate, but he can be I think a 60, 70 point guy in the league for sure and do all those other things that are really going to help you. I think the one thing I can tell you also, I've never had a bad live viewing of him. So it's like I have no reason to put him down in those teens like some others because I've never had
Mhm.
bad live viewing. Now I've watched plenty of video and I do see some mistakes, but again, everybody's going to make mistakes at that level.
Right.
But I think he's going to play probably about 185 pounds, maybe 80, 85. And as a centerman, if he gets to 6'1", that's what you want. I mean, that's a guy who could really, really help you, and he is going to BC.
Yep.
So if you think about that aspect of things, where I think there's another Flyers prospect going to BC. So him and Gauthier, that could be a nice thing. Now,
Yep.
whether they start Smith out as a wing or a center, that's a whole other thing. But they'll be on the same power play, and I always believe in continuity. I do.
Yeah, that's huge for me that, when you're looking at a guy like him in that range, the fact that he could potentially play with Cutter Gauthier, and I think by the draft we'll know whether or not Gauthier is returning to BC or not, and
Yeah.
that would be kind of fun to kind of have a little college affiliate of the Flyers to root for.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big thing, they'll get to play in the bean pot together. They probably already know each other. Well, they do know each other really well. I mean, they did have some crossover as players. So, yeah, I mean, it's a perfect situation. Last year, of course, anytime you try and click on a stat, you get an ad these days. But I'm trying to see where he came in. Yeah, Gautier was just ahead, actually tied with him in points on the U18 part of things. So, you know, if you have two top point producers from that program in your arsenal, in your system, you're doing things right.
Yep, absolutely. BC should be really strong, I think, in the next few years. So they're a fun team to watch in NCAA hockey.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
I was gonna say, sorry for the last thing. For all we know, Smith went there because of Gauthier. Like, guys do want to play with their other NCDP teammates. They search them out.
Yep, they do. That will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow with a recap of tonight's game against the Blackhawks. And then we're going to talk about the back to back against the Red Wings and the Jets. So much Flyers hockey coming our way. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. If you've got Flyers or draft questions, send them in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russell at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.